Some children don't lose their childhood because of trauma. They lose it because they had to keep everything from falling apart. If you were the child who stayed quiet, stayed strong, stayed useful, this video is about you. Because growing up too fast doesn't end in childhood. It follows you into your adult life in ways you don't even realize. Some children grow up learning the alphabet. Others grow up learning how to survive people. You don't remember deciding to grow up early. No child ever does. One day, you're just paying attention in a way other children don't. You notice tone before words. You sense tension before it speaks. You know when to stay quiet. When to be helpful, when to disappear. Not because you're gifted, but because you have to be. In homes where adults are unpredictable, children become observant. When emotions feel unsafe, children learn to be careful. When support is missing, children become strong far too soon. This is not maturity. This is adaptation. When a child grows up too fast, something fundamental shifts inside them. Childhood is supposed to be a time of expansion, curiosity, mistakes, and safety. But for some children, it becomes a time of contraction. Their world gets smaller. Their behavior gets tighter. Their emotions get managed instead of expressed. They learn that being easy is safer than being honest. They learn that taking up less space keeps the peace. They learn that love feels better when it's earned rather than expected. Over time, the child stops being a child, not in age, but in permission. Permission to need, permission to rest, permission to fall apart. Psychologically, this happens when a child's nervous system grows up in an environment where regulation is absent. The body doesn't know what age you are, it only knows whether you are safe. And when safety is inconsistent, the nervous system stays alert. Always watching, always ready, always prepared to respond instead of relax. This is how a child becomes responsible without ever being carefree. This is how awareness replaces play. As adults, these children often get praised. Teachers admire them. Families rely on them. Friends lean on them. Society calls them dependable. But what rarely gets acknowledged is what they had to give up to become that way. They didn't just grow skills. They lost softness. They didn't just gain awareness. They lost innocence. And because this pattern forms early, it feels like identity. You don't say, "I learned to be this way." You say, "This is who I am." You think you're naturally independent, when in reality you just learned early that help wasn't reliable. You think you're calm under pressure, when in reality your nervous system never learned how to stand down. You think you're low maintenance, when in reality you stopped expecting care a long time ago. The most dangerous part of growing up too fast is that it teaches you the wrong definition of strength. Strength becomes endurance. Strength becomes silence. Strength becomes functioning no matter how much it hurts inside. You learn to push through exhaustion. You learn to override emotion. You learn to keep going, even when something in you is begging to stop. As an adult, this often turns into a life that looks successful, but feels strangely empty. You can achieve things and still feel unsettled. You can be loved and still feel unsafe. You can rest and feel guilty for it. You can sit in silence and feel restless, like something bad is about to happen. Peace feels unfamiliar because your body learned chaos first. Relationships become especially complicated. You might attract people who need saving because that role feels familiar. Or you might struggle with closeness because being needed feels safer than being known. You may give deeply but receive awkwardly. You may crave connection but fear dependency. You may feel responsible for other people's emotions, moods, and reactions, even when it's not your job. These patterns aren't flaws. They are memories stored in the body. Children who grow up too fast don't lose their inner child. They freeze them. That part of you didn't vanish. It waited. It learned to stay quiet. It learned not to ask. It learned not to interrupt your survival. And now, in adulthood, it shows up as emptiness, restlessness, anxiety, or a sense that something is missing, but you can't name what. Healing doesn't begin by forcing yourself to change these patterns. It begins by understanding why they exist. When you see your behavior as protection instead of pathology, something softens. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What did I need that I didn't receive?" This is where real healing starts. Because growing up too fast doesn't mean you failed childhood. It means childhood failed you. And that wasn't your fault. You adapted the only way you could. But adaptation is not destiny. What was necessary once is not always necessary now. Reparenting isn't about becoming weak. It's about becoming honest. It's about learning how to pause instead of push, how to feel instead of perform, how to rest without justification. It's about teaching your nervous system what safety feels like for the first time, slowly, gently, repeatedly. There will be grief. Not dramatic grief, but quiet mourning. Mourning for the version of you who never got to be careless. Mourning for the days you spent managing instead of playing. Mourning for the support you deserved but didn't receive. This grief doesn't mean you're moving backward. It means you're finally touching something real. Growing up the right way doesn't mean becoming someone else. It means giving yourself what was missing: safety, choice, permission, compassion. If you grew up too fast, you're not broken. You are unfinished. And that's not a tragedy. That's an opening. Because now, for the first time, you get to grow with awareness instead of fear, with choice instead of pressure, with softness instead of survival. You may not be able to rewrite your childhood, but you can stop repeating it. And that is where your future begins. When a child grows up too fast, the world often mistakes their survival skills for personality. People say, "This is just how you are. You're naturally strong, naturally independent, naturally low maintenance." But survival isn't nature. Survival is memory. And the body never forgets what it had to do to stay safe. Even years later, long after the danger is gone, the nervous system still behaves as if something bad is about to happen. This is why many adults who grew up too fast struggle with calm moments. Silence feels heavy. Rest feels unproductive. Doing nothing feels unsafe. Because in childhood, stillness often meant waiting for the next emotional storm. Over time, this creates a deep internal pressure to always be useful. You feel valuable when you're helping, fixing, explaining, or supporting others. But when there is nothing to manage, an uncomfortable emptiness appears. This is not boredom. This is the absence of threat, something your nervous system was never trained to experience. So you fill the space with work, responsibility, overthinking, or caretaking. Not because you enjoy it, but because it feels familiar. This is also why many people who grew up too fast struggle with identity. When your childhood was about adapting to others, you never had the space to discover who you actually are. Your preferences, your desires, your limits were never prioritized. So in adulthood, you may feel disconnected from yourself. You may ask, "What do I actually want?" and find no clear answer. Not because you're broken, but because you were busy surviving instead of exploring. Emotionally, this pattern often creates delayed grief. The pain didn't disappear, it just waited. It shows up later as chronic tiredness, emotional numbness, unexplained sadness, or a constant sense of being behind in life. You may feel older than your age, yet strangely inexperienced in joy. You may feel responsible for everyone, yet unsupported yourself. This is the long shadow of growing up too fast. Healing this does not require reliving every painful memory. It requires something much quieter and more difficult. It requires learning how to feel safe without performing, learning how to rest without earning it, learning how to express needs without apology. These skills feel unnatural at first because they were never modeled for you, but they are learnable. One of the most important shifts is separating responsibility from worth. You are not valuable because you are useful. You are valuable because you exist. This sounds simple, but for someone who grew up too fast, it can feel almost threatening. Letting go of responsibility feels like letting go of identity. But identity built on survival was never meant to last forever. As you begin to slow down, you may notice waves of emotion rising. Sadness without a clear cause, anger that feels old, a longing for something you can't quite name. This is not regression. This is integration. The parts of you that were pushed aside are finally being allowed to speak. Listening to them is not indulgence, it is repair. Growing up too fast doesn't mean you missed your chance to heal. It means your healing begins later. With awareness, with choice, with compassion. You are no longer the child who had to hold everything together. You are the adult who can decide what to carry and what to put down. And maybe the most powerful realization of all is this: you don't need to become stronger. You need to become safer inside yourself. Strength kept you alive. Safety will allow you to live.